Welcome to American Christian or Christian American. I'm Sean Legacy and I'm your host. This is episode 8, and we're talking about forced conversions and slavery. So we started a few episodes ago breaking down the Catholic Church and how it started with Constantine, how the apostasy, really it's what it was, apostasy, leaving the original church. It didn't happen instantly, but it happened over time. We talked about different practices in the Catholic Church that were not biblical, that they were separate from it. But they could do these things partially because the Pope could change anything he wanted to. He didn't have to obey Scripture because they considered the Pope to be as reliable, which is a conflict. And God doesn't have those types of conflicts. Also, people didn't have access to the Bible so much. There was underground copies of the Bible, but they restricted the Bible access to the common people, where they had to get their information from the priests. So this was a way they gained power. Then we went and talked about the Moors, and the Moors, how they invaded Spain, and they set up educational programs that actually helped educate all of Europe. Their influence over Europe was huge, and they were dark-skinned people. So when people say that dark-skinned people are not intelligent, they're inferior, well, this really shows that that's not true. And before you can call yourself superior, remember that you were educated by information that came from African people. People who are dark skinned. So white people are not superior. It's just about opportunities. And why they didn't have opportunities and it was brought to them later on as they colonized Africa and tore things up, they took away opportunities for people to learn there. And so therefore they didn't have the knowledge that they once had. And that's where we're coming up to now, is after we've talked about the Moors, now we're talking about the Catholic Church and forced conversions and the slavery movement. And after this, we'll be heading towards the United States, where slavery took place. But it happened because of all these things. First, we talked about the original people, had to be medium brown people. If you haven't seen that, you need to go back so you can see the evidence. I'm not just talking for nothing. I've showed different evidences in episode 1 and so on, how the heritage carried on and how these lies have been changed to suit white supremacy and power. All this leads up to the American problems that we've got today. But we're building up to it so people can have a background. We're not just talking about today, we're dealing with ideas and facts that have been taken away from people, their freedoms have been taken away, everything, in order to support an idea that one particular group of people, and they say race, and I also have shown that there is no separate races, that all of us are 99.9% identical. It's only that 0.1% that makes us different. So even science will acknowledge that race, the concept of race is a social construct, meaning it was brought up and taught in order to justify slavery, to justify superiority, but it has no scientific basis. It also has no biblical basis because the scriptures that they've used to combat this have twisted the scriptures. They weren't telling the truth. There is no evidence of whiteness in the Bible, but there's plenty of evidence of blackness in the Bible. There's plenty of evidence of dark-skinned people in the Bible. Now, if you're white and you're listening to this doesn't make you less than human. I'm white. I'm not putting myself down. What I am doing is saying that we're all equal, that we are all children of God. And for the mistreatment that people have received, one reason, and also because it isn't what God teaches, that we are all supposed to be together. We are all supposed to be equal. Now, I've got some information here that I'm going to share, and so we'll jump into that. Okay, last time we talked about the Catholic Church and some of the establishments of the Catholic Church. Not last time we were at the Moors, and before that we were talking about the Catholic Church. We're now returning to the Catholic Church. And we're going back a little bit, again, history of forced conversions by conversions to Christianity. And of course, this is to Catholicism. Catholicism was not what the original Christian church was. It was Constantine taking strong influence over the church, and it was the first Christian nationalism. It wasn't the first church. The first church was set down by Jesus, and there were people underground who stayed faithful to that message. But Catholicism was what forced people to join it. It was a military force. Constantine saw the ability of the church to have great power, and as Rome died out, Catholicism remained. So, we're looking here, remember, Constantine established the Holy Roman Empire in 325, and he made Christianity the official state religion. The Roman Catholic Church that Constantine established used administrative and military powers afforded to it to advance the religion over the following centuries. So it went on, and they would literally force people. They had the idea of convert or die. Well, we looked at this at first with the Catholic Church, then we went on to the Moors. And the Moors, the end of the Moors, took us up to around the 14th century, or basically around the 15th century, 1400, and we've got Pope Nicholas. Pope Nicholas, he is the main subject who began the slave trade. Now, up until this time, there were slaves who were white slaves, but they started to see the profit in gaining slaves that didn't look like them. And several Pope bulls, or they called them bulls, but decisions or creeds, allowed slavery to take place. Okay, so his edict literally granted a Christian nation the right to promote, enforce, and heavily profit from slave trading. Okay, decades later, Pope Alexander VI beckoned Christian monarchs to conquer native populations in the name of the Catholic Church, upholding his predecessor's tradition to enslave non-Christians in whatever lands they may call homeland. All right, so if we look here, this is about the doctrine of discovery, which is connected to Pope Nicholas. The doctrine of discovery, how the Catholic Church authorized colonial powers to seize lands and subjugate people of Africa. So the doctrine of discovery has its roots in papal bulls issued by the Catholic Church in the 15th century. One of the most significant of these papal bulls is Dom Diversas, issued by Pope Nicholas in 1452, which authorizes colonial powers such as Spain and Portugal to seize lands and subjugate people in Africa and the New World, as long as the people on the lands were not Christians, or basically Catholic Christians. The document effectively provided a religious sanction for colonization. So all the colonization that happened throughout the world by Europeans, it was authorized by the Catholic Church. Another significant papal bull was Romus Pontiff, issued in 1455, which extended Portugal's authority to conquer the lands of infidels or pagans for the salvation of all, in order to pardon their souls. The document also granted Portugal a specific right to conquest in West Africa. These papal bulls laid the foundation for the doctrine of discovery, which essentially awarded European powers to claim land inhabited by non-Christians as their own. The doctrine of discovery was instrumental in legitimizing European colonization in Africa. As European powers embarked on voyages of exploration and expansion, they carried with them the papal bulls that provided divine sanction for their actions. The belief that non-Christian lands were basically nobody's land allowed these powers to claim vast territories of Africa without regard for the indigenous populations already living there. So this allowed them to go in and say, well, they're not Christians, we're going to take the land from them. Sound familiar? This is what happened in the United States. They took the land from the Native Americans. They didn't have to excuse it. It was what God wanted, according to the Pope. And even if there was other churches involved, if the Catholic Church wasn't as directly involved, the same idea from that doctrine of discovery was transferred to other Protestant churches. The doctrine not only justified the seizure of land, but also served as a pretext for the subjugation and enslavement of African peoples. Okay? The doctrine also led to establishment of European colonies throughout Africa with a focus on resource extraction and economic exploitation. Nations like Britain, France, Portugal, and Belgium laid claim to vast territories, dividing the continent among themselves at the Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885. So many times what they did is they went in and destroyed the cultural connections they had, maybe education systems, whatever they had. They took a hold of the land. They started to use the land for their own wealth, and they tore the civilizations of these people up and then subjugated them. So whether or not they were taken into slavery into the United States or into Europe, these lands became subjugated. So they may have been slaves directly, but they were living under the authority of European countries. That's how a lot of African nations today speak French and English and other nations as well. French and English are probably the two dominant ones. The consequences of European colonization in Africa were devastating. Indigenous populations faced forced labor, land disposition, violence, and destruction of their cultural heritage. The exploitation of Africa's natural resources, including minerals, rubber, and ivory, enriched European nations while impoverishing the African continent. Okay. Now, so this also authorized slavery. And here's some of the stuff that happened. This is a name, the good ship Jesus. The first slave ship used to enslave Africans was named Jesus. How appalling. They actually named a ship that would take enslaved people to America and wherever else, Jesus. Why they put people in the hold who were suffering. Many died. They were in deplorable conditions. All right, and we go down here. This has nothing to do with Jesus' love and kindness and caring for people. This is about using God as an excuse. And this is what Catholicism did. This was not about God. This is all about power. And that power from Catholicism, which still exists, has spread out through many different denominations. And what we see today, first of all, we saw in the beginning of America, which we're going to get to, is slavery, which is endorsed by people who call themselves Christians. That doesn't mean that all Christians are included in this, but it was endorsed by many people who called Christians. All the way up to today, we're dealing with white Christian nationalism. That is not Christianity. But all this is endorsed by the idea of power and control, the idea of political and religious ideals mixing together, and they pick on certain religious ideas to make things sound good, but it's all about power and control and the rich man. So, looking at this here, the ship was named Jesus. It was captained by Sir John Hawkins. He was considered to be a religious gentleman who insisted that his crew serve God daily and love one another. Worship services were held on board twice a day. Really? This man insisted that these people in the ship worship God, all the while they had people below who they didn't consider really people, but they were all below suffering in these holds, chained up. Like I said, many of them died, some were thrown overboard, and then they were placed in slavery. And yet they somehow believed that they were pleasing God. This is how distorted this stuff is. This is how awful this is, and the same thing goes on today. Maybe not the exact same way, but it's the same evil and corrupt stuff. None of this stuff represents Jesus. Another idea, here we look at the slave Bible in the 1800s. So it omitted several different passages. You go down here, there's only 3 of them that survived. But it's in Washington, D.C. It's a special exhibit entered on a rare Bible from the 1800s that was used by British missionaries to convert and educate slaves. What is notable about this Bible is not just a rarity, but its content, and rather the lack of content. It excludes any portion of the text that might inspire rebellion or liberation. Anthony Schmidt, Associated Curator of the Bible and Religion in America at the museum, says the first instance, this abridged version titled Parts of the Holy Bible, selected for use with Negro slaves in the British West Indies Islands, was published in 1807. About 90% of the Old Testament is missing, and 50% of the New Testament is missing. Put it another way, there is 1,189 chapters in the Standard Protestant Bible. This Bible only contains 232. So they knowingly excluded parts of God's Word. So they weren't missionaries who were really trying to serve God. These were missionaries who were trying to serve man and power. They took away Bible verses that might inspire people to do differently, to react, to be free men, or whatever else, and they only gave them parts of the word that would allow them to be subjugated. So they would think that they're pleasing God by following these people. See, this is straight from Satan. This is terrible. This is not worshiping God. We cannot be connected with people who call themselves religious, and yet they dehumanize and degrade other people. Now, yes, there's sin. And those things we can talk about, but we should do it in a way where we're teaching, not dehumanizing people. If they're not going to follow what the Word says, there's no point in dehumanizing them. Love them. Maybe at some point you turn around. If not, it's their choice. God gives them that choice. All right. So we're going to look here. This is other information on crimes of the Catholic Church. And, well, first of all, let's go back here. The majority of people today, including Roman Catholics, do not know about the true bloody history of the Papal Church in Rome. The true history of the Roman Catholic Church has been hidden away from the eyes of the masses, through the rewriting of the history books, so that they cannot see the truth about the Antichrist Church, otherwise known as Babylon or the Mother of Harlots. So we go down here. So I learned much from the Order of the Jesuits, said Hitler. Until now, there has never been anything more grandiose on the earth than the hierarchy organization of the Catholic Church. I transferred much of this organization into my own party. So even Hitler admired it. Jesuits were Pope's men. They still are today. I mentioned in a previous video about Malachi Martin, who was a Catholic Jesuit. All right. So we'll go here. 200,000 children sexually abused in Spain by Catholic priests since 1940. 300,000 children sexually abused in France by Catholic priests, monks, and nuns between 1950 and 2020. 6,000 Catholic priests abused 16,000 plus known children in 1950 in America. Okay, it goes on with all these different countries. I would suggest that you look this up. Secret History, go back up to the top. Earth's Final Warnings, The Secret Crimes of Papal Rome, and this is what you should find, something like this. You look at it more. And there are many links in here with different videos or other things that you can look at. All right. Tens of thousands of children abused by Catholic priests in Ireland between 1930 and 1990. All right, 800,000 people massacred in Rwanda with support from Catholic Church in 1994. I'm going to try to do a part of that video, but you can watch the entire video. It's over 20 minutes when you go on this link. Thousands of children and adults abused in Catholic care homes in Scotland in the 60s and 70s. 300,000 babies stolen from their mothers by Catholic Church in Spain to 1930 and 1990. Thousands of children tortured and abused in Catholic schools in Switzerland between 1930 and 1970. All right. Between 1553 and 1558, Roman Catholic Queen Mary I of England attempts to bring England back under the yoke of papal tyranny. During her reign, nearly 300 men and women are burned to death at the stake. Her victims include bishops, scholars, and other Protestant leaders. In Yugoslavia, between 1941 and 1945, the Roman Catholic butchered hundreds of thousands of Yugoslavian citizens, Serbs, Jews, and Roma, and hundreds of thousands were forced to convert to Catholicism. And if you go down into this area, it talks more about the Spanish monarch and his confederates acknowledged that they must have lost 400,000 men in the Terminus conflict and immediately after it, but the papists boasted that included women and children. They had massacred more than 2 million of human family in Solidarity for the southwest part of France. It is just horrific of what has happened. But this is what you get when you get Christian nationalism. This is not about God. This is about power. It uses God as an excuse. And this is what we have faced in this country since its inception. It may not be just directly through Catholicism. We face it in the movement of the evangelicals. And I'm going to get into that as we keep moving along with these videos. All right, Alexander Campbell, well-known religious leader of the 19th century, stated in a debate with John B. Purcell, Bishop of Cincinnati, the records of historians, it goes down here to say it is estimated from 50 to 68 millions of human beings died, suffered torture, lost their possessions, or were otherwise devoured by the Roman Catholic Church. And it goes on and on. There's so much more that you can read in these different areas. Now, there's one more document here. Let's see if this is it. All right. So we talk about the Catholic terror in Croatia. Convert or die. Okay, the systematic murder of believers. The untold story of the Inquisition by former Roman Catholic priest Richard Burnett. Okay. And this happened during the 20th century. So this is not that long ago here. Croatia, I don't say that right, was basically carved out of Yugoslavia during World War II, when Adolf Hitler was in power. Okay, if we go down here. So the mutilations were horrific, the torture is vicious, and the savagery terrible. The Catholic Church did not leave the execution of religious war to the secular arm. She was there herself, meaning the Catholic Church, openly ignoring precautions and bolder than she had been for a very long time, wielding the hatchet and dagger and pulling the trigger, organizing the massacre. The Roman Catholic priests became their own instruments of the Inquisition. All right. So as we continue to go down here, it continues to talk about this. And let's see, where am I looking at? At the end, it says, All right. Defendants combined to conceal assets looted by the Croatian Nazis from the concentration camps, victims of Serbs, Jews, Romania, and former Soviet citizens from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, 1941 to 1945. So all this stuff is just absolutely horrific what has happened. And yet, the Catholic Church wants to present itself as faith of God. Remember, under the Pope can say things in contrary to the Bible because the Pope, when he sits in a certain chair, is supposed to be infallible. This leaves that you can say anything that you want to, including starting slavery. The Catholic Church was responsible for slavery. Now, in recent years, they've apologized for slavery, but they still haven't dealt with the fact of who the first people were. They still promote that the first people were white. They're not going to talk about that because it's all going to dismantle everything that they are. They were the first religious organization of Christianity that was could be called a Christian nationalism. And that idea carried on through other churches in other countries as they had the state religions. If you come to the U.S., we said freedom of religion. But there is still a group of people, Christian nationalism, which is Christian white nationalism, which we will go into, that they are doing horrific things today. Okay.
What makes the genocide in Rwanda so unique is that the regime succeeded to convince the general public to kill. How could villagers kill their neighbors? And how could it be done with the blessings of the nation's bishops? And even with the support from European Catholicism and Christian Democrats. The Christian Democratic International, CDI, supported the regime before, during, and after the genocide. Rwanda has had a long, unusually strong bond to Christianity. Missionaries started the Belgian colonization. Belgium gave the church authority to handle the administration. Belgium gave the church authority to handle the administration. The Vatican focused on Rwanda because it was such fertile ground for Christianity. The people were monotheistic, and the kingdom already had a well-functioning central administration. Other African colonies had many gods and poor administrations. With the church monopoly on education, the people were rapidly converted. The Belgian colonial powers and the church ruled through the Tutsis, the elite who had long ruled over the actual majority, the Hutus. The Tutsis retained many privileges. Some received higher education. But this led to thoughts of independence. Tension arose between the church and the Tutsis. As independence spread in Africa, the Tutsis turned to the east and contacted African revolutionary leaders.
And so, as we look here in this documentation, we've seen that there were many atrocities committed by the Catholic Church. And as you see the video we talked about, that was just a clip of a 22-minute video about Rwanda. Now, each one on that one document, if you can look that up on the internet, you'll find different documentations, videos, or whatever else. And you can look at this stuff and research it more for yourself. I didn't have time to put all this in here. But I would suggest that if you're sincere about this, to learn this, to go through and click on those videos. And if you really don't believe what I'm talking about, I would encourage you to look at them. Because at least if you're going to make a decision in a way that is against things, at least you should see all the things that are out there to be counter to what you believe. All right? So by looking at these things, it can't harm you. It can only help you one way or another. If you're not going to believe it, you're not going to believe it. But these things will help you to understand some things. Remember that people are not perfect. God is perfect. But there has to be, with you worshiping with people to worship God, there has to be a sense that people are trying to follow God and not their own agenda. And when so many things about the church are altered, that's not God's agenda. Also, the fact that when people are forced to convert, that's about political power. That's not about God's agenda. When people are denied access to God's word, that's not his agenda. That's people's agenda. That's seeking for power. God, from the very beginning, with Adam and Eve, put the tree of knowledge and good and evil in the center of the garden, and he gave man a choice. Do not eat from this tree, all right? Do not touch it. Well, they did. So they went against God. But God knew they would. So God had a plan already to redeem man. And throughout the entire Bible, God gives mankind choices. And today, in the New Testament, God gives us a choice. I have sent my son to die for your sins because I love you. Because I know you will not be able to live perfect, I am giving you mercy. But you must follow me. Meaning, not that you're going to be perfect, but that you try to live daily following him, that you pray to him, that you learn to love him, that you take the love he gives you and share to others. That is opposite to what has happened with Catholicism over the years. There have been some good things that have come out of Catholicism. I won't deny that. Mother Teresa is a great example of her service of the poor. So even though those good things did come, it still does not justify the creation of the Catholic Church and all the apostasies that have happened and the lies that have happened in order to secure their power. So we can recognize good things that they've done, but that doesn't mean that excuses all the other things. Now, I'm not saying that you can go find a church where everything's going to be perfect. Wherever you go, there's going to be some struggles. And it's important that people pull together and study together. And you're going to have to sometimes disagree, and you're going to have to study more and perhaps build your ideas and continue to talk to people. That's part of us growing in the Lord. But there has to be a notion of some type of consensus of how we're worshiping God, some type of consensus that this is based around love, some type of consensus that we are not here for our own ambitions, but we are here for God's ambitions. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have things that you do privately that you enjoy, but our life is supposed to be centered around Christ. So even the things that we enjoy, those things can still be used. If you have a hobby like quilting or woodworking or gardening, you can use all those things for your enjoyment and still use them to help other people as well, to give them insight, to share with them on different things. Use your skills. I have done gardening. I've mentioned these things. I've done quilts and other things. Every time I made a quilt, I made it for somebody. And the entire time that I was making it, I was thinking about them because I was making it specifically for them. I designed it for them. And so therefore, my mind was around them. And I invested myself in them. You see, that's what we need more of in this world. Thinking about others and doing something that will make their day. Doing something that will help them to understand more about the relationship with God. Not seeking after power or conquest, which is what we deal with in this world. And in particular, this is what we're dealing with in this country at this very moment. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again on American Christian or Christian American.